Hello, DPP listeners. We are only one episode into the 2025 season, but we have some bloody exciting news to share with you guys. Great design and great beer have something in common, keeping things simple and approachable. That's why this year, Design Principles is going to be brought to you by Parrot Brewery. Born in 2011 out of a love for good beer by three guys called Matt, kind of similar to the DPP, but we were born in 2024. By three guys, not called Matt. From their brewery in Lyle Bay, Wellington, Parrot crafts award-winning brews that are as easy to enjoy as they are to love. Brewed, packaged, and distributed under one roof, every drop reflects their commitment to quality and simplicity. Just like Parrot makes craft beer more approachable, we're here to simplify the world of design, bringing fresh ideas and exciting conversations to everyone. We're beyond stoked to have the local support from the place where the idea for the pod was conceived. So next time you're after a beer, keep it simple, keep it Parrot Dog. Nice.
Welcome back to the Design Principles podcast. Sam's got a beer in his hand, so buckle up because this episode is going to be a ripper. So what are we chatting about today? Automation, mass customization. Yeah, I was listening to this other podcast, one of my usuals. I can't remember which one of them. And it had the Zuru guy on there. So Zuru is a New Zealand-owned company, or the three founders, the Mulberries up here in Auckland, from New Zealand. But I believe they basically went to China and started manufacturing kids' toys. And some of their main hits were like the the blow up,
The multi-water balloon.
the multi-water balloon. Yeah, apparently that was a ripper.
Can they do the clip one together ones as well?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, well,
The ones we can fill up like 100 at once and then they just like pinch together, and had lots of fun with those for the nephews over summer.
Yeah, exactly. I guess though they learned how to manufacture, and so now they're getting into house manufacturing, or they probably have been for quite some time, but now their tests are almost complete. So it's looking like they're going to start to open it up to the public and start manufacturing some of these houses, mass customized houses. So I thought it was quite interesting to have a chat about, maybe the future impact.
Is that for the New Zealand market?
It's actually global. So currently they're situated in Italy, in Modena, which is a super random place to be located. I know they have like a factory over there for the kids' toys and that sort of thing. So perhaps it's like something to do with that. So yeah, currently they're in Italy, but basically they are opening this big facility where they are looking to manufacture and mass customize houses. And the way they're doing it is they have been working a lot on like an AI model they call Dreamcatcher, and basically like they are, it's a free-for-all software, so designers or anyone can kind of go on there and play around with a building and stretch it and come up with their own unique designs, and then essentially press print or press play, and that information gets sent directly to the factory where it gets mass produced and sent to site. So quite interesting.
When you say it gets sent to I've got a lot of questions.
There's a lot.
Good. It's hard to just like talk about the whole thing all at once. So ask some questions, please.
First one, where do I start? But like, first one, this kind of harkens back to the episode in the first season of the pod about AI and is this coming for our jobs? Do you see that, or is it more of, again, in the vein of that original AI discussion, a bit more of an architectural caddy or a building industry like caddy, or is it kind of superseding the need for anybody?
So I think the idea at this point in time is that it's meant to be more of like a supportive role for the designers. So architects can kind of have their own little shop built off the back of it, and it's meant to like help you get things through. So it's got every single local code in the world built into it already.
Into the large language model.
Yeah, exactly. Or into Dreamcatcher. So it's meant to like assist you in what you can and can't do. And it's been trained like on a lot of architects. So I guess there is an element of like plagiarism, as I guess Gerard would put it. But I guess from their perspective, it's the builder that it's replacing, right? They want to manufacture these panels or mass produce these components and send it to site. I don't believe they intend on actually having people on site doing the assembly. So I guess that's what the builder would become. And I don't believe that they perhaps will have like some standard designs, but they still want people to build the actual customizable or custom designs and that sort of thing. So I think like there's still an element of like requiring a designer and a builder, but they want to kind of like take that middle chunk and fabricate the components. Like every single material will be manufactured in-house. So every component is going to be like produced on site. So there's no sort of upstream, downstream reliance on other components. And so that's kind of where they believe they can make like huge cost savings and efficiencies in production. And so like some of their costs for their products, they say that they're getting it down to like, $450, $500 a square meter.
Jesus.
So it's significant difference really. But that's probably not including any on-site stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say, how much is that caveated with a lot of stuff?
But still.
Yes, still, it's insane. I guess in terms of like that question on, you design something and press print. What are you printing? Like what is being produced in the factory? Is it essentially like wall, floor, roof, like assembly cassettes? Are they like 3D printing shit? Like what's the outcome? Or is it like traditional construction? Like what are these houses made from? Is it cardboard?
There's not a huge amount of material information, but there is every single component down to like light fittings, switches, concrete structures. Like it's got its own kind of structural engineering element. So a lot of it is just kind of standard kind of timber, concrete. And then like I think there's like a materials that they have been developing in-house. I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm just not sure exactly what the actual materials are, but it seems relatively normal from my understanding anyway. Like if you go onto the Zuru website, you can kind of have a little play and like everything appears to just be like concrete and timber and metal and that sort of thing. Very boxy aesthetic.
Yeah, it's very contemporary modernism.
Yeah, contemporary, yeah. But you can kind of see where they're going with the whole keep everything else in-house and maximize or capitalize on the manufacturing side.
So from the manufacturing side, like you talk about them having a factory in Moderna and Italy at the moment, and then them being a New Zealand company, like would they be looking at having like pilot factories internationally? Like would New Zealand have a factory? So if you're designing a building here and pressing print, it's getting made locally, or is it getting made offshore and then shipping? Just from my perspective, obviously that whole embodied carbon consideration and all that sort of stuff. Like, is it a little bit more closer to home, or are you having to like still import all this stuff from Europe or wherever?
Well, I suspect that it'll start off in one place and then it'll be like based on demand, right? So like if there was like countries that fully embraced it and it made sense to have something more local, then I would imagine they'll start to localize. But once again, like they have literally just finished prototyping all these buildings. I don't even think that they have sorted out exactly how they're going to be shipping these around the world and what their on-site stuff is actually going to look like. So I suspect there's like a fair way to go in the development.
Still pretty much in beta stage.
Yeah, but they're moving fast, so I don't know. I just think the concept's quite interesting, and if it does kind of take off, well, the question is like, will it take off? And do we want it to take off? And like, if it does take off, what does that look like for us? You know, like it's all kind of interesting.
Couple of key questions there, and Gerard, jump in because you've had your thoughts on this as well. But like, that we've discussed this a few times on the pod, but they're like, architecture being accessible to everybody, or good architecture at least, or a quality building being accessible to everybody. This seems like the golden ticket answer. Something like this. We can build for, man, if you can even build for half the price that we are now, like let's say you can build for 2,000 a square meter, that's a huge win. They're saying you can build for what? Do you say 500 to 600 square meter? Like,
yeah,
that's insanity. Imagine the affordable housing solutions you could come up with.
Well, that's a good point. Like maybe this kind of thing will actually just end up targeting that more affordable housing realm. I can't really see it impacting the architectural, which is like the classic top 2% that can actually afford an architect. Maybe like a small portion of them will actually go to something like this, but I can't actually see it.
You say that, Ben, but I think it's a misnomer in that, no, it's not a misnomer. It's a commonality that architecture is generally reserved for people that can afford it, or the higher earners. But I don't think that should preclude good architecture from being available to everybody. And this seems like a mechanism that would actually make good architecture available to everybody, because you could still design, bespoke, interesting things that aren't as carbon copy, or as like a GJ Gardner home or whatever, but at an affordable price point, because you're leveraging this huge machine, for want of a better term, behind you to be able to produce these houses, but you've still got design freedom, because that's what it appeared. I had to play around on the website. That's what it appears like to me, is that there's still, they're sort of promising, and again, like we've said, this is very much in the beta stage, but they're sort of promising that you can design whatever the hell you want, and they'll print it, which is pretty exciting, to be honest.
Yeah, it is interesting. And just going back to your carbon emission comment, it's quite sophisticated to the point where, environmentally everything is tracked. So everything they do, especially you can imagine manufacturing in a factory, so much easier to actually understand
huge efficiencies,
or where, the carbon, where the carbon emissions actually are and what they're kind of amounting to over the course of their life cycle. And so that there's that, and then there's also this, what they're calling, or I can't remember what they're calling it, but it's like a post-occupancy element to it as well. So basically, it looks after your house and tracks everything and monitors it as well, even after construction, which is quite interesting. It really does seem like they've taken a really innovative approach and done a lot of research and tackled a lot of these quite big problems.
Yeah. If we jump back to the bigger overview, I think something that needs to be clarified a little bit is it seems that they're kind of encompassing the whole spectrum of the process, right from the AI creating, they're creating their own software, which would replace your traditional CAD software. So I guess you're already built into a system where you're designing within their parameters and their tools. Is that kind of where we're...
Yeah, that's right. And they're using more, I think Unreal Engine, more game software as opposed to Revit or ArchiCAD or AutoCAD, which is, to be fair, quite outdated and a little bit clunky. Does the job, obviously, but it's not the most efficient. They're not the most efficient tools, that's for sure.
They're not the most efficient tools for concept and imaginative delivery, but they are efficient at ultimately what we need to produce, and that's detailed working drawings and documentation. How is this process? Obviously you mentioned that they're aware of, or the large language model at least is aware of certain jurisdictions, building code requirements and standards and all those sort of things. But how is that documentation process being tackled if they're using programs like Unreal Engine?
Yeah, so they're taking more of a Lego approach, I guess, where it's more like a kit of parts and an assembly, right? the QAing is done with AI, so that's kind of like checked as you go. So is all the engineering. It automatically outputs a working drawing set based on like requirements from the local governance or council or whatever, and it like categorizes who basically it understands where the order comes from and what that council. It's got every council kind of scale ranked on like a scale from like hard to easy.
I'd love to see that chart.
Those are like the complexity based on, I guess, like based on its own experience, because it's just learning as it goes as well, right? And so like, yeah, I think that's kind of fascinating. And I would imagine like, yeah, surely New Zealand, especially we've got earthquakes as well, will be right up there.
Well, like you get ridiculous RFIs anyway. So like, if it's interacting with like an AI that's sent it in a set of drawings, to be that building consent officer like battling away.
Well, maybe for the first couple, surely it'll learn though. That's the whole thing though. Just going back to what Sam was saying, like, surely we all at least agree that the documentation is the part of the process that we should have automated.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the dream, right? Like if we're too, us independently, we're too small to be able to like put the time into developing these things. But I'd imagine like larger architecture firms, like big ones, global ones, and even the bigger ones in New Zealand, I think they'd be kidding themselves or missing the point of the future if they're not exploring already or developing their own large language models to cover documentation. And they'll have more than enough background data to be able to like feed that into a model and get it to start producing working drawings shortly.
Maybe, but on one hand, like no one really collects data. And on the other hand, the price of like cheap labor is probably still too cheap to actually, they could just get like a bunch of students and is on a cheap hourly rate to pump all this documentation out and do all the tedious work. So they might not even have, they might not feel like they need to yet, or I'm not sure if that scale, that cost versus, my camera's just gone all crazy. There it is. Yeah, I'm not sure if that kind of threshold has been crossed yet. But yeah, it is really interesting. And I like to think they are, but I guess like there's also the part of me that thinks like, it's really good learning for the younger generation of, the young architecture designers to, cut their teeth on, I guess. Like there's always that.
That's a very important point, Ben. I'd like to dive into that a little bit more because you're so right. Like the designers or students, grads, people inexperienced, people that are finding their feet or building up their skill set in the architectural profession, if they're coming into the game where they can basically design whatever they want and get a computer or get an AI model to detail it all, how much do you reckon, or do you guys both reckon that the architecture will suffer? Because you're not like, I think that really successful moments in architecture are obviously they have like a high level of creativity and thoughtfulness to them, but like their real success is in how they are realized, like how those are detailed successfully, like particular junctions. This is me personally, but like particular junctions and like the satisfaction of working through a problem, solving it, and how much that influences the architectural outcome. Is that going to be lost on both the designers and therefore like architectural outcomes moving forward? Because everyone's just going to be like, here's a scribble on a piece of paper, AI print this for me. And they're not actually understanding like the nuances of certain aspects of the building.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting.
Like we've seen that degradation over the years already. You look at like older architects like your Franks and Virgil, Hussey Watsits, like used to design everything. Like I mention this all the time just because it's funny, but Frank Lloyd Wright designing somebody's slippers once, like the level of detail that guy went into was like extreme. And like we've lost that already. Like when was the last time we saw somebody do a custom light switch? Or Alston do it? We see custom door handles maybe on like the front door, but like, man, this stuff was happening like everywhere. From houses.
Should we have ever had it? I mean, like building has always been super inefficient, probably due to that level of customization, no one, like, look at a car, right? No one actually knows, other than the mechanic, how a car's put together. And if you think of like the building more of like a product, which obviously these guys are, then it becomes like irrelevant. You're like, yes, there are going to be like a team of builders that know and understand it, but do we need? I'm just asking the question.
Whether we're making spec homes, what's your market? Like, are we whittling this conversation down to answering one question, or are there like multiple questions?
That's literally after you have just said that. I think like the literal question is this architecture, right?
Wow.
I don't, and now I'm questioning, like, is this building a product and housing people? Is this architecture? I don't know.
Yeah, I'll probably argue it's not architecture.
Is a GJ Gardner group home building kind of thing architecture?
I think it's all considered architecture. There's just varying levels of, bespokeness and quality. To me, architecture is everything in the built environment, be that everything from a, fence on a council path, through to a, bespoke, through to a dam or a museum or something. That's all architecture.
I agree it's a lens, like, because that's our profession, that's our lens. Like, certainly going to look at everything as if it's architecture or in an architectural light. But are these guys doing the same? Maybe. Well, they've clearly put a lot of work into like the aesthetics, and like the visuals are convincing, some really nice forms and stuff going on. But is it giving somebody like a fully bespoke
little prop from Gerard there? Didn't expect that out of the pod today.
Few and far between. Well, like I think architecture offers like to your client, like the ability for extreme bespoke. Like, you get to choose your own involvement. It's like one of the books you can read whichever page you want in whatever order. That all handmade door handles by somebody, which is a very easy bolt-on sort of thing in this instance. But I think the analogy survives.
But are they not necessarily promising? Because I don't think they quite know what they're delivering yet. That's my take. But are they not kind of alluding to the fact that you will have that level of customization?
Yeah, but it's all within like parameters.
Yeah, exactly.
But to that point, Gerard, is that not how we're designing now anyway? Because like you've just said, when was the last time we designed everything down to the client's slippers?
Yeah, except right now we're doing it really inefficiently.
We're doing it really inefficiently. Most of the time we're picking from a catalogue of available materials. And it's not even just available materials. It's available materials that bloody councils are going to be happy signing off on because they can't see outside of a tick box exercise.
Yeah, hard.
Like, are we not already pigeonholed as a profession into that? Particularly in New Zealand, I find anyway, pigeonholed already into that sort of direction or into that box.
That's kind of what I was trying to allude to before. We've already seen that degradation, like, in just suppliers' offerings, I guess. Like, we have our preferred suppliers, and it's just so easy to outsource your spec to, Resine or Dulux or whatever. Well, no, this kind of, like, my intention of architecture is to go down that route of like extreme customization. That's why I have a workshop and like to make strange things. Like, I'd like to go down to like knives and forks and bowls, plates, handles, lights.
They might be your biggest competition, mate.
Yeah, my factory at one. You
can buy one robot arm to help out around the place.
Yeah, buy like a bolt awesome robot.
They're not promising that level of detail, are they? They're really just promising a shell.
Yeah.
No.
So like, I think where I want to go is a different direction too.
Yeah, I see. So what you're alluding to is maintaining the integrity of architecture despite this being an offering in the market.
Yeah, I'm fully okay for this to exist. I'm like 1,000% for affordable housing and people being able to, house themselves. I think it's
totally
one of the bigger problems on Earth that needs to be solved. And if this solves it, then shit, bed. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing initiative if this is going to have that result, for sure.
Yeah. But I still like making art.
Design some slippers.
Yeah, man. Do you want some slippers? I'll
I
hook you
want
up.
some slippers. You know I want some slippers.
Some metal slippers. Ben, you said something interesting that's just been twisting around in the back of my head for the last minute. But, you talked about cars and how essentially what they're looking to do with housing is what the auto industry does, and that you create a model of car and you just pump out 10,000 of those, and it's super monetarily efficient because you're just doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, and it's serving a huge need. Like, a lot of people need a Toyota Corolla. That's fantastic. You can produce it cheaply. It's an affordable car. Works. It'll last forever. Happy days. If they're looking at this as a housing solution in that same vein, what you said was really interesting is that only a mechanic really knows how to fix a car. And that's fair. Obviously, you've got some people that are, a little bit more clued up than others. But myself, a car has four wheels and a steering wheel, and I drive it from A to B, and that's all I know and care about it, really. Is that an issue with this as a housing solution, in that it becomes too specialized to understand how these buildings are made, and therefore maintenance becomes a problem?
Well, just like you have mechanics, you'll just have builders that know how to maintain them, right? It really isn't that hard. And don't forget, building actually isn't that hard. Cars are probably a lot more technical. There's not actually a huge amount of
builders.
There's not
On
actually.
your door now.
I can say this. I'm a qualified builder, so take that. Well, there's not a huge amount of components, right? It's just that a lot bigger. There's a lot more labor involved. But there's not that many components. If there's any product that could be mass customized, essentially housing is kind of one of the ones that could make sense.
I totally agree, but think about how much resistance or how long it's taken any form of prefabrication to really make tracks or get off the ground in New Zealand,
Yeah, but that's just like electric cars until one company comes along and
solves it.
Shows everyone how it's done, and then the whole kind of market booms. So, this could easily just be like a spearheading that whole...
Are these guys the Tesla of the housing industry?
Who knows? That's the whole thing, though. We laugh at this now, but in a year's time or 5 years' time, is this going to be everywhere? Who knows?
Whereas to continue the car analogy, have you heard of the Hilux chat? It's the new Toyota Hilux, or I think it's for Indonesia, Philippines.
Oh, yeah, you're telling me about this. This is awesome.
It's such a beautiful little, man, I want it so bad. But it's
but it's illegal.
10 grand, I think, over there.
Legal in a lot of countries.
Yeah, so Toyota's made something that's manufactured so efficiently and so cheaply that it would just cut the market out of most utility trucks in most countries.
And is that why it's banned, or is it missing a whole bunch of critical safety features for many countries, but these other countries are letting it slide to provide an affordable solution?
Yeah, I don't know enough about it.
It's a Toyota made, so half a Toyota's better than a...
Good point. We know it'll last forever.
No, it'll only last half of forever now.
Let's say hypothetically this technology works out amazing and boom, undercuts the entire market. Would they just crash the industry, and would the government be like,
no? Why would they do that? We've got a housing shortage. Can you imagine the kickback?
Yeah, but the thing is that, everything's big business, right? If these guys come in, they take over the whole market, that whole, that I don't want to get into the politics of it, but, the whole building industry in New Zealand is an industry that's rife with monopolization and scratching each other's backs and, kickbacks. And yeah, exactly. It's heinous. And so I agree with what Gerard said. I think there could be huge resistance to something like this coming in because the people on high are not going to be able to get their little bonus from Fletcher's or from whoever.
Maybe this will finally push them out of there then, and everyone will get what they're after.
Yeah, I mean, I think
could be the best thing for the industry.
It could be. I mean, it could make all of us kind of, sit up a little bit and realize that there's real competition out there, and that we kind of all have to sharpen up to,
Innovate or
like you
die.
said, like with the automotive industry. Tesla made the whole world go, stand on watch and go, oh shit, we've actually got to take this EV situation seriously.
Yeah. And then I guess like there'd be like construction companies and architecture firms that specialty kind of like built off the back of them only do, their products and their assemblies and their on-site stuff and that sort of thing. So I guess
just be another accredited installer.
It's interesting. I mean, again, I don't want to keep going back to the automotive industry, but it is a very, very good parallel. It's a very, it's a very accurate parallel, in that there's the market for this affordable, entry-level, mass-produced solution, like your Toyota Hilux truck that you're talking about, Gerard. But there's still a market for your bespoke Bentleys as well. So I think this doesn't destroy, back to like the ultimate question I think that we had at the top of the pod is like, is this going to ruin architecture or the building industry? No, it just changes the field a little bit, but there's still space for everybody to operate.
It'll take a while to be the writing on the wall. There was that recent crime auction in Taiwan.
That was the most, wasn't that one of the most efficient buildings ever built in New Zealand?
Talking about different ones. There's these Chinese.
No, I'm kidding. It's like the most inefficient building. It's like, what if someone calculated? Oh, what was the cost per square meter? It was like something outrageous.
Yeah, so that
Massive
system
blowout.
is like being, supposed to be like, well, I don't know, what, $2,000, 2.5 a square meter max, and it came in at, was it 7 or 8?
I thought it was like 16.
Oh, shoosh. Yeah, probably. So I wonder how much of that was in the factory versus how much of that was the New Zealand installers just ramping up the costs. Yeah. Because if it is a product and most of that's made in China, then you got, I don't know, big chunk of shipping.
Oh, yeah, no, actually it wasn't that bad. It was like, costs over 630,000, totaling approximately 7.6 million for the development. Apparently that's like $3,500 per square meter.
Well, that's probably pretty good there, isn't it?
It said each unit costs 600,
How big are they? How many squares?
which means that the whole development amounted to 0.2 million. So it does. I'm not sure how many units there were, but that's a lot of money.
So I think ultimately it was a system that promised low square meter rates and what it would have been promised the earth, and then what delivered.
Not to deliver.
So I guess just what we're saying here is that this system, or this Zuru system, is still yet to prove itself.
Yeah, so they've completed. Apparently they've nearly perfected their prototypes.
Have they built anything? That's the biggest question.
They've built heaps of buildings in their factories, but they haven't built for a customer and sent it to site.
Because that's the difference. You can do whatever you like in a vacuum, and it will work in a vacuum. You put it into the real world, how well does it operate, right? Like, there's a reason prototype cars don't always get made.
Yeah, but there's steps to it. Right? First, you got to like nail the manufacturing, and then you've got to nail the assembly, and then it's just a logistical game after that.
And then you got to nail it together. Hey, yo. Sorry.
It's a building joke.
I just went full dad mode on you guys.
Yeah. Appreciate that. I'm here for it.
Is there anyone, we've only talked about one company, is there anybody challenging them? Is anybody else doing the same thing? I mean,
apparently, yes.
Right. At home, or as in New Zealand, or internationally, or like who's their challenges out there?
Well, not in this country, right? Not really, because they've sunk hundreds of millions of dollars into it, and I doubt like there's anyone in New Zealand, any builders in New Zealand that have just like a low key hundreds of millions of dollars floating around. But I suspect, like, in terms of the automation, the Dreamcatcher side of things, even like Autodesk and Dassault systems and that sort of thing are probably doing, they'll definitely be working on similar products. Like, how could they not, right?
Well, yeah, I'm surprised that, we're Revit users. I'm surprised that our CAD software doesn't have a level of AI to it already.
Yeah, I know. Have you been using 2025?
No, I usually wait a year until all the bug fixes have been ironed out before I download the latest version.
It's like the first version I've used that is like quite a bit. It's the same, but it's like, you know how sometimes like Apple goes through that process of like simplifying what all their apps look like and everything.
Yeah.
And the changing the colors. They've done that on Revit 2025, and I'm like, what is everything? Like everything is like a different color, and it's like super simplified. But there are some good improvements, I gotta say, from what I've seen so far, just to get a little bit nerdy on it there.
But
for
no
a
AI.
little bit.
That's the trick, though. Right?
Nah, no AI.
That would be an awesome. I'm right here for a new market contender in the CAD software.
In the CAD realm.
These softwares are so expensive, man.
They're so expensive, and they're so, to your point earlier on, they're so archaic, I guess, to a degree. Like, they fundamentally, I mean, haven't changed. And I've been using CAD software for 20 years. I mean, there'll be architects out there that have been using CAD software for 40 years plus.
Yeah.
Like, they fundamentally haven't changed ever.
Yeah, well,
But
another thing that...
Yeah,
No,
sorry.
go for it. No. I was going to say a bit of parametrics brought in by the likes of Rhino and that sort of thing, but ultimately they're still the same thing.
Another thing that really roughs me up is I'm quite sure, like New Zealand, Australia, like everyone gets different versions of the software. So there's like things that New Zealand version of Revit can't do that others, overseas can do, and that sort of thing. And that's always really annoying. Yeah, because I always use like ChatGPT and that sort of thing when I'm like stuck and trying to figure something out. And then it's always like, so many times it's like, you use the New Zealand version and you can't do this. I'm like, damn, so annoying.
It's like Netflix, right? You need a VPN. You need like a VPN for your Revit.
Why does us being a little island nation mean that we get shafted on the functionalities of Revit as well?
We're not going to let you guys develop cool shit.
Nah, exactly. They are controlling our growth. 100% they are. They're light years. They'll have like stuff that's light years ahead that they're just kind of drip feeding the industry.
That's why it needs somebody needs to come in with like a paradigm shift.
Yeah, well, that's kind of why this could be quite cool, just to like give Autodesk a bit of a more competition, that sort of thing. That'd be quite nice.
Yeah, even beyond, because I kind of see the success in this thing, not necessarily. I think they've got so much to prove in the delivery of an actual built, finished project. Like, I think that despite what you say being in terms of what development they put in, I think that there's so much to go in that space. But where the success is clearly going to lie, I think, and already you can see it. I've not played around with it enough, but you can even see it on the surface, is in that like CAD, like challenging spectrum, or in that realm,
Yeah.
So is there somewhere you can play on their software, or like?
I haven't had a good play. I'm not sure if you can download Dreamcatcher yet, but you can have like a little play on the website. I haven't tried to download it. I don't know if it's available yet, but it will be soon.
Yeah, imagine like being able to like teach your AI detailer software, like your type of details, or like along with the basic code, if it could like blend in a bit more.
I had this discussion with someone at the start of the year, midway through last year. I remember I had a really good discussion about AI, and they were astounded that we weren't developing larger language models and feeding them our details and feeding them like our annotation systems and all that sort of stuff, and getting them to build for us.
Yeah. Who was that? What industry were they from?
Banking.
And
they were saying that, all of their focus is on building large language models to do the menial shit that no one else, that no one really wants to do. And that's exactly what we need AI to do for us as well. I mean, to that point though, I still think that we want to really dive in and get intrinsic and get bespoke. You still want to be able to have that flexibility, but all those generic things that you need to deal with. And most of the time, that generic shit is the compliance side of things. Well, why is AI not doing that for us?
Yeah, and so costing as well. So these guys say, because you're flexing your model and adding various elements like windows, doors, materials, that all of the pricing is live as well. So, I mean, like that could be quite interesting. That's definitely something I've played around with a lot in the past and not successfully, unfortunately, but always been an advocate for live pricing.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing. I find that it's a huge thing for our industry. It's a frustration that I have constantly is how in the dark we as architects actually are around pricing. Like, and even to the point where suppliers won't give us, or like merchants and stuff, won't actually give us pricing information. Do you guys find that? And I'm like, how are we supposed to have a handle on how much things are going to cost? Or how are we supposed to get a handle on like design decisions when you actually won't give us a straight answer?
I never had that. Never had that. Hustle hard.
But it just should be easy, right? Like, like obviously, like, yeah, you can hustle hard and you can really dive down. You can like press them for information, but they're usually so reluctant for like, why is there not like a portal for us to just go and be able to like see the reality of pricing somewhere?
Yeah, different builders have different prices.
Well, and there's another thing. You're right.
Yeah, but different distributors have different prices, so a lot of it kind of depends on the level of the builder, so how big the builder is. If they're like a one-man band, obviously they're not putting as much product through. Their turnovers a lot lower, so they're not putting as much product through those, your placemakers or your Bunnings or whatever. And so like you get smaller discounts, whereas if you're a large manufacturing group home builder, basically you get a lot better discounts and rates. And then every single Bunnings and placemakers and yada 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 offer different rates as well, so it's pretty much impossible to have the same.
Well, that's exactly the thing, and that's why it's such a frustration when people try and compare two built projects. Even in this, let's say take New Zealand for example. If you build something in the North Island versus you build something in the South Island, exactly the same. They will cost different amounts of money, so it's so hard for like cost parity in the industry.
Yeah, but that's just the market, right? The market governs it, so it's hard to say because like in South Island, like a lot of the products that you use might not be as readily available as North Island. So there's just so many contributing factors.
Totally. But that's what I love about this like Zuru solution is that you're not being dictated by your locale. You're not being dictated by whether you're using a group home builder or a one man band or anything. Like the price that you're seeing is what it's costing, and that gives so much confidence and surety to the process, which I think is like so necessary, particularly in the residential market.
But what I hate about this is one company gets extremely rich while all of the middle sector, all of the builders, a lot of the architects, whoever it does reduce their workflow, gets
but could you argue
significantly less
it's
demand.
Everyone else's shortcoming for not like bringing themselves up to speed.
This is like
if one person bolts and no one chases them, you can't be blamed for coming last in the race.
Yeah, I do somewhat agree. I can understand what you're saying, but that's also kind of, it's kind of shit as well. Because you're like trained as a builder, right? And you've been a builder for however many years, and then someone tells you, oh, you need to upskill to be a guy who presses a button in a factory. I don't know, like, do you want to? It's kind of not ideal.
Yeah,
the work is like
shifts happen all the time. I guess all the people that just used to draw on a drawing board and then had to start using computers. There would have been some late adapters.
Yeah, actually, speaking of which, another competitor, slightly different, but is on its way for sure. I think Tesla and that company Figure, like the worker bots, those ones are going to have a bit of an impact on the industry as well.
What are worker bots?
Like humanoid robots
that are designed to like
the Boston Dynamic scenario.
like lift stuff.
There you go. I
Just
named
do
this,
some of those monotonous tasks.
I named this episode "I Am Robot." That's the whole premise of that
Yeah,
film, isn't
well,
it?
Yeah. I think they'll be quite popular even in this country. I would say we could probably even start seeing them within the year, right? Within the year?
Do you reckon?
Yep.
Maybe two?
Set out robots that are like
Yeah.
hilty
The
set out robots that like prints
They're
out
pretty
your
cool.
plans onto the slab, which is pretty interesting.
Oh, I've seen
It
those.
is.
They're cool.
They do seem to be horrendously expensive. So it's like, yeah, are you a big enough company that you can get one of those, or does that just become another sub trade?
Well,
Yeah.
you know, by the time it takes you one man to just go ping some lines, you know, like it's absolutely not feasible. That's like half a day's work to ping some lines, or half a day's work for a bunch of guys to stand around waiting for a robot to ping some to print some lines.
It needs to be a really fast robot.
Yeah, it probably is. I haven't actually seen it. They do look cool though.
You have go make cups of tea.
Yeah.
I think like the integration of like one of those worker bots could be quite, you know, you could easily integrate one of those onto your site quite easily, you know, for all the heavy lifting and like taking the wheelbarrow out and all of those tasks that actually kind of do some physical damage.
Yeah.
I can see why that would be good, kind of good.
Yeah.
Speed it up.
Totally. But then you get into the argument of it taking jobs from labourers, you know?
Yeah, or
So-
maybe that's like the apprentices cutting their teeth on all of those tasks.
Yeah,
Same
well,
scenario as
As the
Well,
architecture
the
grads,
drafting,
yeah. Are we getting lesser builders because they're not having to
Maybe
push
we
a
just need a-
wheelbarrow? No, I don't know about that.
yeah.
Right. Hate it or love it. Who's got a hate it or love it?
All right. On that note, motorized wheelbarrows. Hate it all. Is it taking too many jobs away from the so?
Are you talking about motorized wheelbarrows as the one that just have like a motor in the wheel? Yeah, they're great.
Yeah.
Love them. How could you hate those?
We brought like one of those little motors for the front of our boat, so we could like pull it out the driveway 2 meters without having to push it.
That's
And
lazy.
damn, it's so
It's
heavy. It's heavy.
And
It's so good.
It is a ride, so that's money well spent. I'll be here for that.
I'm pro motorized. I've never actually used one though, funnily enough, but they do look cool.
So is that
you
yeah?
can
Right.
use-
Hate it or love it. Motorizing menial
Motorising
things.
wheels. Yeah.
Motorizing wheels. I'm
You've got a
definitely
wheel?
pro.
Polarize it.
No, I'm going hated actually because, you know, they weren't around when I needed them.
Oh.
I don't want them now. I don't want them to come in now when I'm not going to use one.
You could get back on
My
the tools.
building
Ben.
days are done.
You could get back
I
on
don't
the
need
tools.
one anymore.